Welcome back to the PDHP and CAFS podcast. Look, I'm going to be really honest. We started recording this episode about an hour ago, or we should have. We are with Jamie Gerlach. He is the CEO for Transformative Learning, the 4Cs. We have literally been talking for nearly an hour already, but we're actually going to officially start recording. So, huge welcome to the podcast, Jamie.
Thank you, Kel. It turns out Kel and I didn't have any trouble having something to talk about in the last hour. It's lovely to be here. Thank you so much. Say hello to all the magnificent PDHPE and PAS and HMS and all the excellent
Okay.
people out there.
Yeah,
And I
thanks, Jamie.
reckon you've probably got a whole bunch of maths and science teachers sneakily listening to your podcast and not telling
Yeah,
their friends.
probably. Can you give us a bit of a background to you, your experience, and what you do now, empowering and changing education?
Sure, absolutely. So I was a teacher in high school context and did some teaching and work in primary context as well. And before that, I had a whole different life working in the arts in various forms. And I started doing this work with this organization at the beginning of this organization, which is about 8 years ago now. Our organization is called 4C Transformative Learning. It's a very long title, and I highly recommend if you ever start a business, don't make it that long a title. It's very annoying. So
Right.
we like to refer to ourselves as 4CTL now. So our organization was created to support schools in particular, and other learning organizations to develop in a really intentional, explicit way the capabilities that lead to humans feeling like they're flourishing and agentic, whether those humans are students in schools or their teachers or their leaders. And so yeah, so my passion for this work comes out of just believing that people should feel a sense of agency in the world, just generally, that human flourishing is a pretty good baseline for what should be expected. And that learning is a really, really amazing and very effective pathway to developing a sense of agency, developing your capacity to learn in particular versions of learning. And so schools and other learning organizations like early learning centers that we work with and tertiary context, but are places of learning. And so therefore it shouldn't be too hard for them to be places of human agency and human flourishing,
Mhm.
which I think often they are. But I think we could continue to reimagine them and transform them bit by bit by bit to help just keep doing that better.
Mm. And look, we've already spoken about this, but some key words that I often say, we want our teachers to be flourishing and thriving. And we are really like reimagining what we do in education at this point in time, especially in New South Wales. And we've spoken about this before, and you'll probably see it every day in the schools that you work with, not just in New South Wales, but across the country, that we have massive educational reforms, especially in New South Wales, the biggest educational reform, you know, in history. And, I was actually presenting yesterday to the Bathurst Diocese, Catholic Diocese. And so I traveled there from the Central Coast down to Bathurst, and it was kind of like down and up to Bathurst. And they said, oh, like, why are all these changes happening? So we kind of addressed that very quickly. And they're like, why can't we just tell them, like, we just want some more time? I'm like, there's no more time. You're not given any more time. We have like literally 5 years, every single course, pass, HMS, K to 6, 7 to 10 PDHP, child studies, finally finishing on CAFS is changing.
Yeah.
And teachers often like freak out. They think about, oh, like, yeah, I love the idea that things are changing, but the work, the time, like I can't keep doing this the weekends. I don't have any more energy to do this.
Mm.
Like, how do I suppose from like an umbrella kind of, perspective, how do we kind of reframe those changes and that sense of, I don't know, fear and overwhelming teachers?
A little question.
That was
Um,
a loaded question,
that's a
actually.
good question. Look, I think that that's exactly what you're talking about is kind of the motivating force of our work as an organization, our team. Um, my simple answer is, which sort of, you know, sits above a lot of complexity. But my simple answer is that the more that we focus on processes, sustained ongoing processes that help develop people's capabilities, then the easier these externally enforced challenges become.
Mm.
So the more that people, so our 4Cs, there's lots of versions of the 4Cs. I think Fulham has a 6C. There's lots of versions. There's a lot of good education words that start with C, it turns out. Ours is a creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical reflection, which is probably the one big difference between ours and a lot of other versions, which mostly have critical thinking or courage or citizenship or curiosity or whatever. Those things are all wonderful, by the way. But the reason we have built our work around these Cs is because there's a lot of evidence and research to show that if you develop these capabilities in people, and equally importantly, you develop the capability in the culture of the organizations, the communities that we exist in, whether that's a classroom, a staff room, a whole staff, a faculty, a year group, whatever, that you will develop a shared capacity to navigate change with an empowered ability to navigate change. It's not going to mean that suddenly it's just going to be easier, it's going to be quick. It's still going to consume time, but we do get better at seeing how you can prioritize time more effectively, how you can integrate things in effective ways to feel like you're gaining time. I say this a lot in when I'm working with teachers and leaders, that there's no more time. It's never going to happen. So there's only kind of, and time is, I don't think your audience or you will be shocked, Kel, to know that time is the first response in everybody's. What are the challenges to doing what we want to do and to live out our goals and our passions, our visions, is time, right? So you can't just be like, oh, well, forget about it. You just got to deal with it, because that's not, the people are experiencing that lack of time. But I think there's multiple ways you can kind of respond positively in an empowered way to the time conundrum. One is that you try to talk less about a lack of time and more about priorities. Now that's hard because teachers don't necessarily have complete autonomy over what they prioritize. And that's difficult, but you do have often, I think teachers have more autonomy than often they feel like they do around what you choose to prioritize, whether that's what you choose to prioritize in terms of how you're divvying up time within the curriculum. NSW are trying very hard to unwrite some of their old wrongs about that and saying teachers make decisions about where you need to put the time into, what outcomes, etc. I don't know that teachers are hearing that, but it is in the new curriculum. They are trying. Or it's just the prioritizing of your time in a day-to-day sense. So that's one way. And that's hard. It's hard because prioritizing means you have to deprioritize things. And when everything feels really important and really high stakes, it's hard. And that's why having collaborative opportunities with others to work through and this is why critical reflection is one of our C's, to really deeply reflect and challenge some of our assumptions about what's the most important, what matters, what's going to have the biggest benefit for our kids. What are we willing to push back on in a proactive way? What are we willing to recontextualize if we need to? To use the word you used before, how are we going to creatively reimagine how we do things in order to be able to prioritize the things that really matter? Nothing more disempowering than feeling like you're having to prioritize stuff that you don't think is important. It's just like acid on your sense of empowerment, your sense of purpose. So I think that there's that's one way to deal with time. It's not going to solve the problem, but it can have an effect. The other thing, and this is particularly in a learning context, I think when it comes to dealing with time constraints, is understanding the power of layering learning. And that every learning opportunity has whether it's a professional learning opportunity, it's a formalized learning or informal, or whether it's a classroom or whatever, has the opportunity to have layers of learning going on. You can be let's just take a classroom example. You can be doing a lesson which is ostensibly about a content bit. It's about learning how to the body mechanics of how to throw a ball in a particular way or something. Excuse me if I'm getting my terminology wrong, but I'm giving it a crack. Um, and so that can be one layer of the learning. It can be what feels like the primary layer or the most obvious layer, which is this content piece, skill piece. But then there's also the opportunity that could also be an opportunity for metacognition and actually understanding yourself as a learner, not just understanding yourself as a thrower, but understanding yourself as a learner. What am I seeing? What am I noticing in myself? How is that informing me and helping me develop strategies in other learning that I can apply to other learning contexts? That can be part of that learning. You have to structure for it. You have to build in reflection, metacognitive reflection. But you could also be there could also be a layer which is about collaboration. And so actually we're learning to throw, we're learning what it feels like to learn about throwing, but we're also learning how to throw with others, which is more than just throwing with others. It's about learning how to learn with others, how to be with others. And that layer can be built into it as well. And you can keep going. And you can not just have those layers implicitly built in there and hope that happens. You can make that intentional. The teachers can be like, I'm actually designing my learning so that the students are going to experience the learning that they're learning to throw. They're also learning about themselves and they're learning to work with others all in one lesson. It's harder than just being like, it's just a lesson on how to throw and that's all it is. And let's hope the other stuff just happens along the way. So it is harder in that sense. But the payoff is bigger because the medium term time you will save by developing disposition and capability and insight in learners means they're going to learn better, which means you're going to save time later on. Didn't think we were going to talk about time for that long, but anyway. So I think that there's the most understandable, but also the most disempowering and ineffective attitude to time is it's like, I'm just overwhelmed by time. We just don't have enough time. I would do all these things with enough time because, and I understand it. It's completely understandable. It is really overwhelming, and teachers have never had more on their shoulders in all the ways that I'm sure your audience are very familiar with, literally day to day. But if the narrative becomes, well, we would do these things that we really think are important and that work, but we don't have the time, then I just think everybody loses.
Yeah. And the biggest loser are the kids. Like they're the ones who lose out the most because we haven't taken that time to step back from the curriculum. And I was saying this yesterday to the teachers in Bathurst, like, what are we actually teaching here? Like in its core, what are we actually teaching? Not the content, like get rid of that. What is, and we're talking about health and movement science. That's what I'm like, what is HMS actually teaching? Like, in its essence. And I think they found it hard to articulate what it actually was because it's so complex and PE teachers and you've been a senior teacher, we often go straight to this is the content that I need to teach. If I don't get through this, they're going to be like examined on the HSC, there's going to be in their trial. Am I setting up for success? Like we start to kind of go down that rabbit hole of the content. But if we take that step back and think about the big picture, and, I talk about backwards mapping with our teachers, understanding by design, like all those really great frameworks and approaches. I say, okay, let's think about where we're actually headed with this, not just like, let's, tick and flick, rush through the content. Like if we can start to think about, how to maximize our learning and, through the 4 Cs is a great approach. And look, the 4 Cs are embedded into our curriculum now, like the collaborative investigation, creativity, like it's actually in there. We have to teach this stuff. It's one of the, we have the outcomes. There are content outcomes in our new syllabus and there are skill outcomes. Creativity is like, it's like literally, I can't remember what outcome it is. It's in there. But we can't just keep teaching to the test. We can't just keep, using a Google slide and, a textbook to teach. We have to reimagine what our teaching looks like.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
it takes time. Like it does take time, but
I guess, oh, sorry, I didn't talk to me.
no, you're right.
No, I guess that exact point that you made then is is how we try and work with schools, is to go, there's not a lot of teachers out there who are like, you know what, I don't think we should develop these kids as humans. I think we should make them content robots who can like this. But the pressure of all the things, that's the thing. So the challenge is rarely in the why. Occasionally it is. That's fine. People have different ideological perspectives about what learning, what schools are for. But most of the time it's a what, it's a how question. It's like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to fit more in. And so a lot of our work with schools is to help them see, one, to give them support, tools, processes. We Part of our work is developing coherence making frameworks. So for our capabilities to go, if your job, so say, in the new syllabus, it's like, you've got to teach creativity to these kids. Cool. What's creativity? It's a ginormously complex concept. It manifests in many, many, many different ways. And it's also got all this kind of mythological sort of associations with it that often make people feel quite distant from it. I would suggest, from my very unofficial research of working with lots and lots and lots of teachers, it's about 60% of teachers will tell me they don't think they're a creative person. So how are they going to teach creativity if they don't even believe that they have it in themselves, right? Now, one, it's a misunderstanding of what creativity is what's informing them saying that. So in order for teachers to be able to feel confident to teach creativity, they have to have an opportunity to understand what it is and to learn different ways you can teach it, and to then go, oh, now how do I apply that? My subject isn't a creative art subject, so how do I apply it? That's about understanding what it actually is as a process, or collaboration for that matter, or whatever it is. And so part of our work is helping with the process, the actual pedagogical processes. Here's ways you can teach elements of collaboration or creativity, but also to give frameworks to help break down the complexity of it. We call them our coherence makers, and they become tools that get used pedagogically. They can be used from a design perspective, like you can program using them. They can be used in an assessment context. You can assess creative development by using them, and we've created all these assessment rubrics to sort of support with that. But you can also just break it down and be like, cool, creativity, that's a really big thing. Let's break it down. What actually is involved? Well, first, in the context of our coherence maker, it's noticing. You've got to notice things really deeply to be able to then create in response to them. So cool, creativity feels like a hard thing to teach, but I can teach noticing. I can create pedagogical experiences for my kids to notice stuff. That doesn't seem like a bridge too far. The next thing is asking why, really why, which is, asking deep questions. Teachers can teach questioning. We don't do it enough, I would suggest. We teach kids to answer the question. We don't do them to ask them enough. But like, so you start breaking these things down and you go, okay, well, this is manageable. This is teachable. And in fact, you can't notice nothing. You can't teach noticing on nothing. So what can they notice? Oh, they could notice the stuff that I have to teach, this feeling like, what is an overburdensome curriculum content? Great. Well, that content becomes the stimulus for the noticing. The process of creativity becomes the way that I guarantee that learning is going to happen in a deep way, and that the capability needs are being met along the way as well. Again, it's kind of the layering thing along the way.
Yeah. So if teachers are like, okay, creativity is in health and movement science, like what the hell does that look like in my class if I'm going
Mm,
to teach creativity?
absolutely. Well, and again, I guess this is where breaking it down and being like, well, what is one? There has to be some critical reflection on what creativity is, right?
Yeah.
That's important. It has been, as this is coming from somebody who came from the arts, the greatest theft in education is the creative arts stealing creativity. Now, they didn't really steal it. I like to say it as a provocation, but there is an association that happens that we go, oh, creativity, that's something to do with art or design or whatever. And absolutely, it's vital to those things. And it has a particular explicit place in those forms. Um, but it's no more there than it is anywhere else. And so I don't know. Okay, I'm a basketball obsessive. It's playoff time in America at the moment. It's very tiring to do a lot of late night watching. Um, but one of the reasons I love watching basketball is because of the creativity that's evident in the playing of it. Now, I know that's just going to the sport thing and it's not taking up that. Um, so in that sense, that there's an opportunity to see if it's deeply noticing, it's asking good, rich questions, good critical thinking around it. It's them having the skills and the confidence and the courage to play with possibilities, to think divergently, to not get fixated on an outcome, but to allow ideas to germinate and play with different things. And then to have the evaluative skills to identify from that possibility thinking what might be the best response to this creative challenge. They're all just really key things that fit across, like key skills that fit across any learning area. If
Mm.
you and yeah, so you can look at the application can be, well, there's creativity in playing sport and manipulating those skills, but there's equally, I know, like a lot of your stuff, you like PDHPE does a lot of heavy lifting around explicit intentional learning around socio-emotional stuff.
Mm.
Um, Particularly in a high school context where obviously in a primary context it's happening in a more integrated way naturally, and there's probably more of an emphasis on it. But in a high school context, in terms of if people are just like, my job is to teach my syllabus, the only syllabus that's really deeply, meaningfully, explicitly looking at social emotional skills, as far as I can tell, is your syllabus areas. Now, the rest of them all need to be doing it because you can't do the other learning anyway, but obviously, um, but so to take the creativity, so part of it is developing respectful relationships. That's a key kind of content outcome and skill base is developing the skills to be able to understand, analyze, and engage in positive relationships with others. Having good relationships with other people is partially a big key element of that is empathy, is actually having the capacity to notice other people's experiences, to try and understand those experiences, and then to take action in compassionate action or altruistic action in response to your understanding of what they're going through. Now, part of that analysis is going, oh, well, I'm reading their facial expressions, blah, 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 whatever. But a huge part of it is imaginative. It's like you have to imagine yourself into other people's experiences. You can't ever do it perfectly, but you can. But the power of human imagination is why we're really good at empathy. And so there's a key parallel skill there between the empathy required to engage in positive relationships and which is that the imagination requires to engage in creative thought and creative problem solving as well. And I
Mm.
think that so there's that at a kind of meeting the curriculum method. And I would suggest just beyond that as well. It's like, how are you going to, these kids are living in a really, really complex time. It's always been complex being a kid, or, particularly as an adolescent or whatever. It's unbelievably complex at the moment, like profoundly complex at the moment. And you think you're going to develop in them the capacity to navigate this unbelievably complex world without creativity? I just I can't even understand how that could be possible. Um, let alone the creativity required for you to now look at a new syllabus as teachers and be like, how do we make sense of this? How do we integrate it into things we've already done that we know work and we want to keep doing? How do we draw from it inspiration to create new things? Because there is an expectation and a requirement, an opportunity, I would suggest, more importantly, to do new things.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, I think one big thing that our senior teachers will definitely resonate with and kind of connect to, like we say this word propose, and even though like propose is to create new ideas or suggestions, like that's creativity, like applying is a new, I'm not sure if you've seen this,
Mm,
apply has been added to that big glossary of keywords that NESA bring out. Critically analyze, critically evaluate has been re-added. It's been in there before, but it hasn't been on that big list. But I'm
yeah.
like, apply, that's just creativity. Propose, like you have to think of new ideas that have never been considered before
Mm,
and, put them forward as a suggestion. Like these are all ways that our teachers can actually incorporate creativity. It's like not, they don't have to paint, a picture of the body systems. That's not creativity. It's that, that critical thinking, that deeper thinking, that's those new suggestions. But again, we need to reimagine all of these, because so much of the time in senior courses especially, it's been that learn about, learn to, learn about, learn to. No, there's more like opportunity now for you to be creative, for you to think big picture. You know, and like you said before about the NESA, you know, being more open and flexible with the hours. Yeah, we have to teach the course, you know, a certain number of hours in seniors and juniors, but you can kind of like, if you're going to explain something, that could take you like 5 lessons. It could take someone else 2 lessons. Like
it's almost like the kids in every classroom aren't the same, and maybe that they're going to require different amounts of time to do things.
exactly.
Yeah, and look, I think, and this is my, I do a lot of work with curriculum, and obviously in the last couple of years, an intense amount of work with our schools around curriculum, with the new syllabuses and supporting schools to engage in an empowered way with the new curriculum. One of my greatest frustrations in school, in education, is, and I think, you know, I think this is a changeable thing. I put a lot of my energy into trying to do this, probably drive people nuts with it, but is that there is a narrative frame or a power dynamic frame between teachers and the curriculum, which is completely out of balance. Teachers, a lot of teachers that I spend time working with, and I would suggest you probably had this experience as well, Kel, genuinely see the curriculum, whatever that means, and they're usually just talking about the syllabus, and they're usually just talking about the syllabus outcomes, as a authoritative figure for which they are submissive to, and that there's a power dynamic, that a disempowered power dynamic, submissive power dynamic to the curriculum. The curriculum, and we have a way of framing this when we work with schools, which is provocative sometimes, but the curriculum is different in every single context. There is no curriculum. I mean, you can use that word to describe the combination of syllabuses if you want, but you know, as if you're working in this particular, I know we work with a primary school that's, you know, a tiny little village primary school with like 10 kids. And it's like, are you trying to tell me the curriculum there is the same as the curriculum at the giant metropolitan school of 1,300 kids? Like it's because the syllabus documents are the same. The curriculum's not the same. It's insane. The curriculum is everything that there is to be learned in a school context, everything that kids can learn. The syllabus is a great, very important part of that. There to be applied, to use your word, responded to, critically engaged with, and then brought to life within the context that it exists. I think that's pretty much what NESA, in their bumbly, not very effective way, are trying to say. I understand that people don't hear it with tinny ears a little bit, because they created the outcome dot point nonsense obsessiveness. But if I achieve one thing in my role in education, it's to convince teachers that the syllabus documents are a tool that can be used for their own empowerment, and more importantly, the empowerment of the kids. That it is not, the syllabus is not their boss. The syllabus is an offer. It's a curriculum offer made by the authorities, for which they then take, respond to, apply with their own empowerment. Now, I understand all the reasons why teachers hear that and go, what a load of shit. We're going to get audited and people are going to, you know, there's an expectation that we're ticking all this stuff off. I would say to them, particularly in New South Wales, reread your new syllabuses with a finer eye and see that they have really changed some of the language around it. And also, I would say that if you're doing what's best for the kids who are in front of you, and you're bringing that curriculum to life in the most authentic way, that syllabus stuff together in the most authentic way, in a logical way for them, in a sequence that works for them, couching it in things that are authentic and genuine for them, they will learn more of the syllabus anyway. And then if you do get ordered, you can say, look how much they've learned. I know it's easy for me to say that because, you know, I'm not in the classrooms anymore doing this day to day. But the alternative is that we just feel like we're getting hammered by this this authoritarian document all the time, and then you just have disempowered teachers leaving the industry or continuing and feeling brutalized, and kids who are the unfortunate recipients of that toxicity or that negativity.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I mean, we've created a tool for our PDHPE teachers. So it's kind of like incorporates like all of the good practices that I've picked up over the years, formative assessment, understanding by design, backwards mapping, which is kind of part of that anyway, and brought and a bit of PBL in there, but brought it into a tool that, we're sharing with teachers, with both PDH and HMS at the moment, and then CAFS will come to think about your context. Like we're teaching the syllabus,
Mm.
but like for your kids, what's happening in your school? What's happening in your context? And how do you need to like readjust the syllabus a little bit, the curriculum to kind of meet the needs of your kids? Like we're all teaching from that same syllabus document, but it's our interpretation that then guides the kids through that curriculum. Like we can't just keep, churning out stuff and going tick, 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 done. Okay, we're done. Here's my stupid, and we had this on the Central Coast. I don't know if you've heard of them before, but white folders where we would have to keep every single document for compliance in this white folder. It would get audited twice a year. And I was like, look at our Google Drive. All our evidence is on there. Like it's there. Why do we have to reprint it to then show our deputy principal twice a year?
Mm.
And every faculty had to do that, like for compliance. No, like trust me. Like
And
on there.
it's cycles of disempowerment, right?
Oh,
You've
man.
got you've got middle leadership who are terrified that they're not going to be meeting their obligations administratively, so they do this stuff that is, not the best prioritizing of time.
Yeah.
And then you have senior leadership in schools who are feeling a pressure from above. The the answer is not my answer is always what feels to people like quite a radical response, which is it's your school. It's actually the kids' school. They should have a voice in how things are done, and not just a token voice. They should have a real voice. That it's the teachers' school and the support staff school, and that they should have a genuine level of autonomy and response, and the opportunities to build their competence and feel connected to each other. And then, it keeps going up that way. And actually it's and then it's a reverse order of power, I think is the way we should be thinking about it. And I know that there's lots of things that evidence that the wrong way, and it sounds utopian to say that. But if what we are existing in is a culture of oppression in public education, or in education more broadly, I know you and I were talking about public education before in New South Wales, which I think there'd be lots of people who would say that that's what it feels like, then the greatest way for an oppressive force to sustain a culture of oppression is to just have people keep doing the same thing, because they just keep oppressing themselves. Now, that doesn't mean that what I'm advocating for is that, every public school in the state should raise its pirate flags and sail off into, I don't know, independence or whatever. But we have to have that spirit, which is, if the way you're telling me to do something is not going to serve my community, then I am going to work with others using our capability that we're developing internally, our creativity, our collaboration, our critical reflective skills, our ability to communicate in an effective, empowering way to each other and to the school community, to make sense of that in a way that makes sense for us, whether that's at a syllabus level or it's at a nonsense kind of administrative level. And there are things that's really hard to do at the moment, because we're obviously in a culture of, for want of a better word, autocratic, crazy.
And look, I haven't shared this publicly. I've shared it with a couple of people, like more so in person, but I stood up at our school and I advocated and I questioned what was happening. And in my role as a leader in community and family studies, supervisor of marking, professional learning for 15 years, teachers were coming to me about certain things. I went to the authority, being NESA,
Mm.
not behind my principal's back, but to advocate, to ask the question, why after COVID, of all things, are we making our teachers actually work out, like, for each percentage of an assessment, like your skill part, like how much of a mark is that worth with skills? How much of that mark is worth with knowledge? I was like, we don't have to do that. We just have to say, here's the skills, 60%. Here's the, actually, yes, that's right, skills, 60%. Knowledge, 40%. We don't have to break it down for each assessment task, what we're doing. Like, that's just madness.
Yeah, we call it there's an amazing drama educator from the 20th century called Dorothy Heathcote, who was more than a drama educator. She's an educational philosopher and practitioner, right? I think. Anyway, she had this concept of the cop in the head, which is referenced as well in the pedagogy of the oppressed stuff, Freire stuff. And the idea is that in structures where there's an imbalance of power, like, for example, teachers versus a system or whatever it is, and likewise in a class, students versus a teacher often as well, is that the oppression is sustained because now, and again, I'm not suggesting this impression is like intentional, like they're up there being like, oh, how can we crush them? It's systemic blunders most of the time, and bad policy. But that when those who are in the oppressed state create their own internal cops or policemen in their head, which is, I can't do this, I'm not allowed to do that, I have to teach all the dot points. No, you don't. Nobody ever said you had to teach all the dot points. It was never said. Drives me crazy. I have to, make sure I give equal amounts of time to everything, or I have to blah, 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 blah. That all of these things, often they are understandably misunderstood because the communication of that stuff is really bad a lot of the time. But having someone with the agency, like you just talked about, which is that I'm just going to go talk to them. I'm going to challenge it. I'm going to use my capacity for my own critical engagement in the world to say, what are you actually saying? Because I'm hearing this and I'm not convinced. And instead of being like, well, I'm just going to tell you all to bugger off, you say, no, I'm going to go and find out. I'm going to use a curious, inquisitive mind, to use the language of your new syllabus. I'm going to use my collaborative inquiry or my critical inquiry skills to go and find out. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to be able to say, well, actually, the narrative is slightly different to what we think it is. And this is actually what it says. And then that's what it says. Let's deeply notice what it says. And then let's use our creativity to reimagine, well, how might we make sense of that and apply that in our context to for what's best in our context. Not blowing it all up and not doing it, but just being thoughtful and creative and critical about how you go about it. And this is the reason these skills are so vital for our kids, that they can feel confident, that they can be critically engaged in the world, that they can communicate in effective ways that feels empowering for them and other people, that they can collaborate meaningfully, not just work with other people, genuinely collaborate, engage in a shared endeavor, and that they can imagine things beyond what's right in front of them. If those things are going to be developed in our kids, if we're going to really be able to say we know that we are achieving those things, then we have to be building and developing opportunities to grow those skills in ourselves, and not just occasionally, but sustaining that. That's why we do this work with schools, is to help them with the how to do that. And I guess the other thing I would say, which I think is often missing, but it's so profoundly important, and it's so not everywhere, but I feel like it's missing when I walk into schools more and more, is none of this deep learning stuff that is what's supposed to be what this is about happens without joy. Joy is the lubricant of learning, particularly of deep learning, and not just at a kind of like touchy-feely, oh, it's nice if everybody's happy and having a lovely time. I mean, that feels like it should be a baseline anyway. But actually, at a physiological level, at a neurological level, when you are experiencing joy, your brain is completely differently equipped to learn deeply. It's your way your memory works is different. If your body is involved in an active, practical way in relationship with your brain, because they're the same thing,
Mm.
um, then then you are going to learn more deeply. And I just keep going, and this is not all the time, but I feel like and often, and I would suggest some of your audience might be feeling this, that there's an increase in joylessness in schools. A thousand reasons why that's the case. It's understandable. I'm not suggesting it's not. But if we don't fight for joy as much as we're fighting for those other things, then those other things aren't going to be possible either. Um, and joy is there's a amazing uh, Aboriginal educator and theorist that I am quite obsessed with in our organization is as a team quite his name's Tyson Yunker Porter. Some of your audience might know him. He was had a significant role in the articulation of 8 ways pedagogy, which people are often very familiar with, but and has also written a bunch of great books and in all sorts of ways. Sand Talk is truly one of the best books I've ever read if anyone's looking for a book review. But one of the things he talks about in that book is that kind of talking about the relationship between joy and learning. And he talks about two different types of joy. That there's the joy of the frivolous kind of joy that you look up and you see a nice sunset and it looks lovely and it makes you feel good, or you watch a funny movie and you get joy out of it. And then there's which is important, by the way. It's not saying that that's not important. That's important, but there's this other type of joy which is he calls it fear, the joy of fear, the joy that comes from fierce engagement,
Mhm.
and that humans um, are designed culturally, emotionally, physiologically to seek out fierce engagement. We are energized by fierce engagement. We have to build the skills to be able to sustain that engagement. But this is part of the reason why doing deeper learning and having pedagogical approaches to engage in learning more deeply leads to that level of joy, and that level of joy becomes a cycle. Then it feeds the capacity for deeper learning. So, more joy.
Yeah, more joy sounds good. Look, we could seriously like just record a podcast for the whole day, but I do have one more question for you.
Um,
And I ask this to all of our educators on the podcast. If you were to give your younger teacher self some advice, what would
so
it
much.
be?
So much. Um, oh, I've thought about this a lot because like every teacher, I think you look back and you go, oh God, what were you doing? I would say that the process matters more than the ideas, particularly at the beginning. Um, and telling people stuff is the most ineffective way for them to learn.
Yeah.
Because I think I did a lot, people will be shocked after listening to me rant, but I did a lot of talking, was like, look at all these great things, and I can do a song and dance numbers, and people are, and they're clearly getting so much learning from my wonderful ideas, and then realizing that's just a terrible way to learn. You can learn from listening to people. I mean,
Yeah.
doing a podcast right now, hopefully to support them, but you don't deeply learn without other methods. And
Yeah.
I think that it took me a little bit of time to realize um, that the students were going to benefit far more from me providing processes and experiences for them to engage deeply in things than me just tell them the stuff that I thought about that I thought was deep and interesting.
Mm. Yeah. Look, great advice. And it makes me even think about professional learning. I know we had that conversation before we started to
Yeah.
record, but that's another conversation for another day. If our teachers want to connect with you and your team and your work, where can they find you guys?
So you can go straight to our website and click on the you know talk to me thing, the mail list or whatever. So 4C Transformative Learning .org is the website. You can just go direct to me through LinkedIn if you're in that funny world. Um, and I'm happy to give Kel my email address, direct email address, and if that's helpful in the notes or something.
Yeah.
And I guess the one thing I would say, and because I have to probably talk about how we work. Our work is quite different in a professional learning context. One, we tend to have long ongoing kind of emergent relationships with schools, built very much on developing really strong relationships with those schools. We work in leadership, and we work with a particular focus around leadership and developing capabilities in a school as an organization, and working with teachers directly around bringing this stuff to life in a classroom context. And we work differently. Every school is its own journey, and it's very bespoke and responsive. There's no kind of off the shelf, oh, here's the program for 2 years or whatever. It's an ongoing co-constructed relationship, sort of focusing on what schools, somewhat what their needs are, but also what their opportunities are. I think it's interesting in your new curriculum, actually, that there's a big shift away from needs in the languaging to I can't remember what the languaging now, I've forgotten it, but it's to opportunities, or that's not the right word. I'm getting it wrong, but moving away from needs based to skills to what's the language?
Yeah,
Anyway,
I think this is very
to what kids can do as opposed
yeah,
to
yeah,
what
yeah,
they can't do or whatever.
yeah,
And so I think sometimes in a professional learning concept, how do we solve these problems? And I think that needs to be part of the professional learning. But I think also schools should be engaging their professional learning journeys of being like, this is what we can do. This is what we're good at. How can we throw some really exciting fuel on this and
Mm.
extend what we can do? Um, Yeah, I think there's probably a room for a bit more balance in that in schools, as opposed to like, I've got spot fires. How do I put them out?
Yeah, yeah. Look, thank you so much to give like
Pleasure.
nearly 2 hours away of your time. I know that you're very busy. Thank you so much. You have dropped so many like gold nuggets. I think we'll probably make the episode 2 episodes, like a part 1, part 2. But thank you so much for your time and your ideas. Look, so many things to consider for our busy teachers, so they can reimagine what they're doing day to day in PDHPE. So
Pleasure.
thank
And I just want to, I'm sure there's a lot of wonderful PDHPE teachers and primary teachers who listen to your podcast that I have worked with over the years. So I'm just going to say hello to all those, because some of
you.
them have been some of my favorite people I've worked with. So
Nice.
you
And
know who
we're
you are out there.
and we're moving into that space because we saw a need that primary teachers don't have much support in PDHPE. So we have a whole, membership for K to 6 New South
Amazing.
Wales schools. So yeah, we're very excited
Well,
with that work.
I'm very happy we work in a lot of primary schools, and I'm very happy to um to let them know, because I know there's a lot of primary teachers who are desperate to want to do stuff in that space,
Yeah,
and do need support and ideas. So that's
yeah.
great that
Thank
you're
you.
doing that.
That's lovely.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Kel.
Thank you.